Matthew is a hard gospel to preach, especially in November, because in these texts that we have starting now and continuing before Advent, Matthew offers more warnings about hellfire and damnation than all three of the other gospel writers combined. And so, starting this Sunday and in the ones to follow now, he will treat us with warnings to wait, make the most of our gifts, and do good or else. And while Matthew's parables all present their own challenges, I'm finding this one about the bridesmaids to be the most challenging. And there are several reasons for that. First of all, this seems like a really archaic and strange story to us in our culture. We're not accustomed to the role that virgin bridesmaids played in ushering in the groom to the wedding ceremony. So the whole story feels off to us and confusing. Another reason that it's a challenge is that this parable largely is meant to appeal to a community that has come through some significant hardships to keep the faith and to wait expectantly for Christ's return, even though it has already been delayed beyond what first-generation believers anticipated. I mean, if you think about it, the letter that Paul wrote to the Thessalonians that we read just shortly before, he wrote in about AD 51. The book of Matthew was written 30 years later. So not only are the Thessalonians anxious that they've missed Jesus' return, you can imagine it's harder to inspire Matthew's community 30 years later. And now, of course, project that out more than 2,000 years later to us. And you begin to appreciate the challenge of preaching this text today. I mean, really, who today is still eagerly awaiting for the imminent return of Jesus in the flesh? Except maybe for the people that write the billboards and that we scoff at. It's a challenge. There's another challenge with this. The parable seems, really kind of unfair. I mean, all the bridesmaids brought their oil, all of them waited, all of them fell asleep, and the decision about who gets into the wedding comes down to who anticipated that the bridegroom was going to be incredibly late and so brought more oil. Well, okay, maybe it's not unfair, but I feel like it's unfair because I'm pretty certain that I would have been one of those foolish bridesmaids that didn't bring enough oil. So what do we do? What do we do with this stubborn, somewhat antiquated, and rather threatening parable? Well, I have a few thoughts. First of all, let's admit that this is an odd parable, okay? It's odd. It doesn't fit with our culture. We don't fit with this story. We just don't have virgin bridesmaids ushering in a groom into the wedding ceremony anymore. We just don't do that, and they don't wait until midnight or however long they wait. I mean, our ceremonies are very, very different. So let's just admit this is just an odd story for our culture. Secondly, the core issue seems to be waiting. Yet the kind of waiting that Matthew is talking about here is hard. They're waiting for something long overdue, waiting for something you're not even sure is going to come at all, waiting that involves being prepared actively when you're not even sure what you should be preparing for. So that kind of waiting is challenging, to say the least. But then this theme of waiting is important for us because it's something that we are all used to doing. Whether it's the excitement of waiting for Christmas when we're little kids and it seems to take forever, or maybe we're waiting for a phone call from some special someone, or maybe we're waiting for news that someone has taken a long journey that we love and we're waiting to hear that they've arrived safely. We all know what it's like to wait. We know how hard waiting can be. So here, actually, I think, is the focus of this parable. Waiting is often hard, really hard, and oftentimes it's tinged with anxiety. What are you waiting for? What event maybe you're looking forward to? Or what kind of waiting are you finding not only difficult but anxiety producing? Is it a call from a doctor with test results? Or maybe it's word from a family member that you've been estranged from and you're waiting for words of forgiveness or reconciliation, or can we heal this rift between us? Or are you waiting for the pain of bereavement to end? Or are you waiting for a new job? Or waiting for a new home? Or waiting for news from that college that you just really, really want to get into this coming fall, next fall? All of us are well acquainted with waiting. And whether what we're waiting for is good or bad hardly matters, because the anxiety and the stress of living in that in-between time of waiting can be really, really hard. And this parable reminds us that we're not alone as we wait. From the earliest Christians on, we confess that waiting is difficult. And in addition to this, we look at where Jesus was when he told this parable. Jesus was in his in-between waiting time. He was in between the time of his triumphal entry into Jerusalem and a few days later when he was going to be tried and executed on the cross, and he knew it was coming. All the gospel writers tell us that he knew it was coming. So here Jesus is in that in-between time of waiting for him, and here he is, teaching, facing his opponents, even as he waits for the cross he knows is coming. Jesus knows how hard it is to wait. Now, I realize that the kind of active, prepared waiting for the return of the Lord that Matthew is encouraging these followers 90 years after Jesus' resurrection, that's a whole kind of different waiting that I've been talking about. So what do we do with that? What do we do with that waiting? That waiting for Jesus' return 2,000 years later, and he hasn't shown up yet. Is he really coming? Physically, bodily, is he really coming? Or is it going to be another 2,000 years or 10,000 years or however long till that happens? Waiting for Jesus' imminent return is hard for most of us. But Jesus also comes to us in other ways every single day and every single moment of our lives. And this is what Paul is promising to the Thessalonians, is that while you wait for whatever that date is, when Jesus is finally going to return bodily and physically or whatever that means, you will all be together with Christ. And he comes to us every moment of the day. So where do we look for and how do we find these opportunities for waiting on Jesus, who's all around us anyway? Every time we work for justice, as Amos invites us in the first reading, we testify to the presence of Jesus now. Martin Luther King Jr. knew that presence of Jesus daily, moment by moment in his life as he fought nonviolently for the equality of races and people of color and us. Every time we work for justice, as Amos invites and as Martin Luther King Jr. did, we testify to this presence of Jesus in our world. Every time we bear each other's burdens, we testify to Jesus' presence in our life right now. Every time we advocate for the poor, every time you gather furniture and take it out and give it away to people who have nothing, we testify to the presence of Jesus in our community and in our lives. Every time we work to make this world that God loves a better place for all, we testify to the presence of the risen Christ in our world right now. But even this kind of waiting and preparation can be hard to keep doing. We can grow tired in this work. We can become frustrated by the lack of outcomes that we see. Is it worth it? Is it worth it when we see poverty and when we see injustice continue in our world, is it worth it? And we get tired. And we get distracted by the 1,001 other obligations of our day-to-day lives. In short, on any given day, every one of us might discover that we are the foolish bridesmaid. Given this reality, what we can do is we can reclaim church as a place where we gather to find help and support in our waiting, in all our kinds of waiting, as we try to live as disciples of Jesus. I find it striking that Paul closes this part of his letter to those first century Thessalonians, remember, who he's writing to about 30 to 50 years after Jesus' ascension. He's writing to them who found their waiting nearly intolerable, and he says, therefore, encourage each other, encourage one another. And that is our role as the church. We are those who wait for each other, wise and foolish alike. We are those who sit vigil with each other at times of pain or loss or bereavement. We are those who celebrate with each other our achievements and console each other in our disappointments. We are those who give hope when there seems to be no hope, comfort when it's needed, and courage when we're afraid. We are those who help each other wait, prepare, and keep the faith. We are those who work for justice in our world, because that's what it means to be the risen Christ now and to wait for him to come for us, whether it's in our death or whether it's in a physical coming back, whatever that looks like. He will come for us. He will come for us. And as we work together for justice, that's what it means to wait. And in all those ways that we work together, we encourage each other. And that's what it means to be Christ followers, then and now. And that's why we come together every Sunday, to hear and to share the hope that Jesus brings and the promise that he is coming to you right now. Right now. And when you die. And in every moment in eternity. Thanks be to God.